Awesome. So this discussion is on the history of BBYO, which we all know has had a long and illustrious history in Dallas and is very ingrained in the Jewish community. And we have joining us today Ms. Debra Polsky, the former director of BBYO and our current executive director here at Dallas Jewish Historical Society. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So when we post this on the interwebs, I am Jessica. I'm the archivist here for the organization. And I am moderating this discussion. It'll be community driven, a series of questions that will help teach us about the history of BBYO. So question number 1, and anybody may answer. What do you know about the history of BBYO in Dallas? How did it evolve and how did it form?
I don't know either.
Debra may know that.
I actually don't know how it evolved.
I know a little.
I know it was one of the early chapters of it. Originally was just AZA.
Yes, my father.
And it was just called.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Marilyn. It looks like Debra cut out. So tell us.
Yeah. My father was in the AZA chapter that was first here. I would assume by his age, he was born 1916. So I would assume in the 30s, maybe, early mid-30s, that was active. And when he outgrew that, finished high school, they started a group here in Dallas called the AODA.
AODA, right.
Yeah. Which was, with his father, which was alumni of Dallas AZA. And they had a basketball team. I think you all there at the Historical Society have some pictures of that. I know my father and who were on that. But it was a very active social group. And as they got married, they would have socials with their wives and those single. And I have photos someday to give you of these events that they went to sometimes. And it went on into, I don't know, Joe, do you have any idea how long it lasted? But I would
No, I just remember, no, I don't know how long AODA did. I remember I was a bat boy for their softball team. But I don't know when it dissolved.
I remember probably at least the mid-50s to early 60s. It was
something like
hanging in there, I think.
Very cool.
I do know that it was very active here, and there have actually been 4 or 5 international presidents of AZA from Dallas,
Right.
and 1 international president of BBG. In the early days, the AZA chapters, you didn't have to be just in high school. They actually people stayed in until they were like 19, 20, even 21. And so the first guy that was the international president from here was actually like 20 years old, or 19 or 20 years old. And his name was Donald Newman.
We have that name at all.
Well, that was, it was a long time ago. I can't remember when. I know he came to AZA's 75th anniversary thing that we had in Omaha. He came and was one of the speakers.
That's
so he was
started, right? In Omaha?
Yeah. Yeah, Omaha has the mother chapter #1, and then certain numbers were always reserved. So they have #1, number 100. I can't remember what the other ones are going forward, but amazingly enough, as a BBYO director, there are some of the kids who were absolutely the worst. Hilarious, my grandmother would probably say, just crazy, wild kids. Several of them went on to become rabbis, and I see their names from time to time at, one of them is it plays music, and I see his name from time to time when he and his partner have come in at Temple Emmanuel. But I don't know what I don't know what they were really focused on in the early days here. Anybody know?
I just know that you're correct about the age. My father, when I was always said, he was in it after high school for several years. It wasn't like it is now or back when I was in it.
Well, they didn't go to college.
They were older guys.
Yeah, you're right, Marilyn. A lot of them didn't go to college. They just went right to work.
Right.
Right.
So they were still needed this social group in the community, I guess.
Yep.
Debra,
Especially if they weren't married.
right. Debra, who are the other ones that were international or national presidents from here?
Okay, let me think. Mark Kleinman. One of the Kleinman boys.
Really?
Yeah, he was an international president. Brian Surek.
Right, I knew about
Brian
Brian.
Surek,
Yeah,
that's
Brian
right.
I knew.
And Doug Levy. And the most recent one was, and of course I can't think of his name, he went to Yavin.
Oh, the grandson of Mo.
Yes, Mo Stein's grandson, exactly.
Grandson, right. I can't think of his name either.
And who
Yeah,
who
that's
was
exactly
the
right.
BBB president?
Her name was Renee, I think it was Renee Romick, I think was her maiden name.
Muriel's daughter, I met. Her granddaughter.
And it's pretty unusual because, the Dallas Jewish community wasn't always that big. We were considered
Right.
a small, medium-sized Jewish community. And for there to be that many consistently really spoke to what the program was like and how people participated and were involved, even at the international level. Because I think there have been a few others that were international officers, not president, but.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Alexis Prager was something. I don't remember now whether it was national or international.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there used to be a level. There used to be 4 levels: the chapter, the region, and up until, I don't know, 30 years ago maybe, it was Texoma region, so it was all of Texas and Oklahoma.
In District 7.
Huh?
District 7.
Right, District 7, which was made up of the states that were B'nai B'rith's District 7.
Mm-hmm.
Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi.
But Arkansas wasn't in it, I don't think, right?
I don't think.
I don't think, because there was only 7 in the 7.
Yeah. And so that was the district level. And interestingly, the only connection those cities still have is with the Jewish Children's Regional Service
Right.
in New Orleans. And they're still made up of the states that were part of B'nai B'rith District 7.
That's correct.
We were cleaning out the drawer.
So districts and we, huh?
When we were cleaning out the drawers over this period of time, I came across this. My
Let's see if you can see it.
T-shirt from District 7 convention.
I don't know if you can see it.
Sometimes.
There we go. Cool.
Very cool.
I don't think I fit it anymore, but I did.
Because I was
You're
in
funny.
such a long time ago in Tennessee, but I still remember all those songs that were District 7 songs.
Absolutely.
And my sister, I think, went to for a long time, they had their conventions in, I want to say Shreveport.
Are you sure?
I know for a while they did, and they had it at some college as well. I mean, I don't think it moved
Centenary
much.
College, probably. Centenary
Could be.
College, but I don't remember Shreveport having, in our day, having any chapters, but
They didn't. Yeah, they didn't have any chapters.
They had Young Judea.
They had Young Judea, because that's what I
Right.
had in Waco. And we used to go to Shreveport all the time for Young Judea.
Yeah, it's Jessica, go on, because otherwise I can monopolize this entire discussion.
That's really interesting. I think we're all learning quite a bit. So we have one more question, or we have several more questions, but I have one more in addition to what's on my list. So who can tell us a little bit about when BBG formed? Because wasn't it AZA and then BBG came along? Does anybody know sort of that timeline?
well, ZESMA was the first chapter that I was in, and I understand it's inactive at this present time, sadly.
Yeah.
What
What
I
I
heard
hate.
too.
It was so huge, and it was so big during my time. It split off. Well, they had Wadle, and then they split off and made Chefs, which also folded years back.
It
But
folded the year I
they took
came.
it away from
Oh.
ZESMA. It was so large, and there were 3 chapters, and then over time, of course, many others, several others were added. But it was before me that it started, which was I got in like 1956, I would say, time range. There were already, who was active, if you could find, Susie Weitzman, what's her name now? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The name sounds kind of familiar.
Herb Weitzman's sister, her last. her
Oh,
married-
Susie Ablon.
Avalon.
That's
Oh.
it.
Yes.
She was always at our reunions. She was old, several years older than me, but she would have maybe some knowledge because, if it started before her or not.
Mhm. Very cool. We'll definitely look into that and ask Susie. We have Pearl Klausner's BBG Sweetheart, AZA BBG Sweetheart pin.
Wow.
Based on, I talked to Debbie Schwieg a little bit, and based on the time that Pearl was in and other clues we could determine, we thought it might be late 30s.
Wow.
Yeah, because they said that Pearl was the first AZA sweetheart.
Yep, the very first one. So we do have that little breadcrumb. But based on what we have in the collection, we don't have a lot of succinct chronology for all of that. So that's just something that we're always striving for. Awesome. Next question.
Part of the part of the problem of not knowing is because we only have a couple of the original charters.
Mhm.
We have what was just called Dallas AZA. That was the first chapter. And then I don't know. I know there is someone in town who has all the charters, but
Really?
even when I was in BBYO, they wouldn't give them up.
Huh.
So,
Wow.
We'll have to try again.
Mhm.
Awesome. So what role does BBYO play in shaping the Dallas Jewish community and the Jewish community at large?
Well, when I was growing up, it's where everybody knew each other because that's the only way we knew each other. There were only 3 congregations, Temple Emmanuel, Sheriff
Right.
Israel, Berith Israel, but that's the way everybody knew each other. That in Hebrew school, those who went. But this way, almost everybody. I think I mentioned this in something we had recently. The only ones that weren't in BBYO, there were a few families that thought it was too Zionistic and would not let their kids join. The kids wanted to, their families wouldn't let them because they were too pro-Israel and for them. But anyway, how everyone met everyone was through BBYO, and I think that went on for even till today probably, because there's even more schools today they're at. And we either went to Highland Park or Dallas schools, that was it. And a few people were in private schools, but some of those are the ones that weren't allowed to join. And that's how we knew each other to this day. I mean, that's how we met.
That seems to be a continuing trend. From some of like my generation that I've talked to. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, that was the main thing about AZA and BBG. All the kids were from all different, either synagogues or no synagogues or whatever, but we were all together, and it was made it. It was really great. There were some people that, well, some people were members of both, but they had a Temple Teens group from people that didn't join up with, but even so, a lot of those were in AZA also. And that's where we got to know all the people, all the kids in town. And it was really good.
And as an outsider, because I didn't grow up here, but it seems that that group, Marilyn and Joe's groups of kids, were very close, and they're still close to this day. They may not see each other every day, but that whole group of AZA and BBG, they still are a community.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how Facebook has facilitated that. Because I was the BBYO director in 3 different cities, 3 different regions, and also knew kids from the March of the Living trips and at some of the summer leadership programs. It's amazing to me how they still are, a lot of them are really connected by Facebook. You know, they haven't seen each other in 30 years, but they're, you know, somebody has a baby, or somebody gets married, or somebody has a death in the family or something like that. That's the first people they hear from, are those people that they spent 3 or 4 years in high school in each other's pockets, basically. And, you know, I think that's one of the things that's really been so amazing. There was a study done in the, I want to say the 80s, I think it was the early 80s, about the Jewish BBYO and its relationship to Jewish communal leadership. It was done by somebody who, out of Brandeis, I think. And they sent out surveys to BBYO alumni all over the country asking, like, what they were doing now. Were they involved in their synagogue or a Zionist group or the Federation or the JCC or whatever? And they found that about 80%, at that time, about 80% of the community leadership had been in AZA or BBG.
Wow.
And they might not have ever even been, you know, that active, or maybe not an officer or something like that. But you can talk to a lot of people now who say the leadership skills they learned from BBYO. You know, those formal meetings and Robert's Rules of Order, and, how to plan a program and things like that. It was really, it'd be interesting for them to do the study again, because I suspect it's not as true as it used to be. But that was a pretty amazing, when I worked for BBYO, we loved that statistic, that it was one of the 3 primary indicators of people continuing a connection to the Jewish community, along with day schools and Jewish summer camp.
That's fascinating. Definitely has had a large influence. What, if anything, is unique about BBYO in Dallas compared to other places?
Ooh, can't compare. I don't know.
What'd you say, Joe?
I don't know. I knew people when I went to all these conventions, and they seemed like me or people I knew. I mean, they weren't any, they were the same kind of people. Same.
The interesting thing I was just thinking is Houston was so much like us too. And when I went to college at Newcomb, I knew so many people that came from all over District 7 from going to meetings and conventions, and then also, of course, Texoma and people in Oklahoma and Houston. And we all immediately knew so many people from so many places.
And that is one of the things that's really nice even today, because our granddaughter is in Kansas, and she says she's still seeing people that she knew through BBG in Dallas. Because
Right.
they feel like you're connected already.
Yeah. It really does give, a common ground.
Right.
People going into school. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's sort of indicative of that Jewish geography.
Yes.
You have kids who go on an Israel trip, and the trip has kids from all over the country. They were in AZA or BG together, or they know, oh, you're from Dallas, do you know so-and-so? And, they do, because they met them at international convention or regional convention or, something like that. And I think that's very much still true.
And like when my kids went on the Dallas team tour, which sadly they don't have anymore.
Yes, that.
But back in those days, almost everybody knew each other. I mean, 95% of those kids knew each other by the time when they went on the trip, because I think of BBYO they were in together, because they go when they're 16-ish. And so that was really nice. So now and then there'd be a few people that for some reason they didn't know, but they learned to know quickly, but they were already knowing each other at that point.
It's really nice to have that familiarity, especially before an international trip. So how has BBYO evolved since its early years here? How is it different now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago?
I don't know.
I think, well, I know from grandkids and my nieces and nephews, their kids, and it's much more difficult because people live so much further away from each other than they used to. Everyone lived either in Park Cities or Preston Hollow, pretty much. I mean, you had nobody in Plano back when we were growing up, and Richardson. And so it was easy to plan events and to have carpools, pick people up, and those who drove. And today I'm gathering from this other generation, newer generation, that they're, they try to get into chapters near where they live so they can get to some place. And the ones who live further out, say in McKinney or something, they're just really upset about it all. And, it's so dispersed. I don't know. I think it's much more difficult to get members because of that, because they may get in and then drop out quickly because it's just so hard. They just very diverse geographically.
Yes,
Right.
yes, certainly is.
But in that case, they really have to have a true desire to be in. I mean, in our case, I have 2 grandchildren who live in Bedford. We have 2 in Bedford. Now, our granddaughter was so involved and loved every second of it, and she would spend the night here so she could go to all of the things.
Oh, wow.
Our grandson came, but he was also involved in a lot of things there, so he kind of dropped out. And so it takes a commitment on the kids' side, and I find that
Certainly does.
yeah. I mean, I know our other grandchildren have not been involved for some reason, which I hate, but you know what can do.
You know, what can you do?
Yeah.
I wish one of our former interns, Liz, had originally told me she was going to participate today, and it thinks that she had something come up. And I wish she had, because she is a BBYO advisor currently. And I was really hoping to have her perspective on the other side of it. But I do know that almost weekly or a couple times a month, they do have gatherings here at the JCC, and she does some videography and stuff for them. But that's pretty much what I've gathered from her and the little bit that she has shared with me, that it really is, it is a commitment. So, you know, the people you do have involved really do want to be there and are incredibly active in the organization. And probably, as you all have said, a little bit different than the past, just when it was the way to meet and know everyone. There's a lot of diversity in how we can do that these days.
And I'm sorry that Joe's cousin has to get in on this, because she has 3 grandchildren, 2 of whom are very active in Dallas, and 1 who is now on the national board, isn't he? From Austin.
From Austin.
From
yeah.
Austin.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's I'm glad to see that happening.
Yes, that's super cool. Very good for her.
I just thought of a very funny story.
Yes.
When my brothers, one was in Monsky, one was in Kaplan. So the one in Monsky played basketball, and my father, he got my father to agree to sponsor the team so they could have uniforms in their intramural AZA basketball sports. So they ordered these jerseys, you know, for basketball downtown where the store was. My father ordered it, and he sent his main porter worker, Pearlie was his name, as an African-American guy, and he sent him to pick them up because they said they were ready. And he got to the place and he said, "Oh, you've made a big mistake. These are not correct," he told the people, because it said Monsky. And he said, "Oh no, his name is Donsky." This is a true story. He called up my father from this place. Said, "Well, this man's picking him up. He said we did him wrong." My father was hysterical. He said, "No, it's correct, Monsky." It's a true story.
That's funny.
That is funny. Deborah, it looks like your mute is back on your phone. Do you have anything you'd like to add to how Dallas BBYO has evolved? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Try on your phone. Is your mute button on there?
Is that better?
That is better, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, just that it is different in different cities. Omaha, because was a much smaller, tightly knit Jewish community, was probably more like what it was like in Dallas in the, 30s, 40s, 50s even. It was people were very close. They, kind of everybody joined whether they wanted to or not because their parents made them. And some people were active, and I learned then that it's really not for everybody. Some people are not joiners, or it doesn't float everybody's boat. When I moved to San Francisco as the BBYO director there, which was a much more spread out community, people really had to want to be involved. You know, if you were driving from Oakland to the office was in San Mateo, which is down on the peninsula. So if you were coming from San Jose in the south, or Oakland in the east, or, you know, the North Bay, or the city, you had to really want to be there because you had, you know, it was a big driving distance, and yet the kids were very involved, and in some ways took advantage of the local talent in a way that didn't exist in other cities. You know, we had somebody whose mother worked for Bill Graham, who was a concert promoter for Huey Lewis and the News. So he played at one of the dances, and you know, and the dances changed considerably. You know, here in that, when I got to Dallas and they had walk down, I realized there was no dance at all.
Right.
Really just a ceremony. When I was growing up, it was a dance.
Dance, yeah. And what?
And so, you know, things have changed in that respect as well. And then when I got to Dallas, it, as I said, Sheps was closing as I got here. And people were very upset about that, rightly so. But one of the things I heard here that I had never heard anywhere else, and I started out as an advisor in Chattanooga, so I'd been involved for a long time, was when we put people into chapters, they had this system here that the computer did and assigned them with their two friends or whatever. And I had parents who, after the selection, were very upset and came to me and said, you have to move my daughter, you have to move my son, because they're not our kind of people.
Oh, wow.
And I had never had, you know, I was just so shocked. I'd never had anything like that. And the kids, I think, had a little bit of that. You know, there was a lot more cachet to belong to Zesmer and Sheps and Sobolowski than there was to belong to Wadle. And joining Monsky or Brandeis or even Kaplan was a little more social than some of the other chapters. So I think that's the thing, the difference I saw here was that it was much more socially based, and we really had to kind of work at promoting the religious component and the community service and stuff like that. And after a few years, I mean, I think the culture changed as well. So the kids were very much into that, but it was an exciting place to be the BBYO director here because there were so many kids and so many parents.
Right on. Thank you for that perspective of all of the different regions.
By the way, I think perhaps now that there are so many people still alive, still in, you know, in the community that had a very positive BBYO experience, it might be something to try and have some sort of program around. And you might get a lot of people who aren't members, who should be because they've been here a long time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that are parents and grandparents at this point. But I think, you know, it'd take a lot of PR to get them to reach all these people. But I think it could be a very interesting, maybe a panel program, people from the different decades or something.
I agree. I agree.
And
I'll put a
people
note down.
could bring, I have, you know, a lot of them have, well, I don't have for that, but people still have scrapbooks. They have things that no one, and they probably, hopefully haven't thrown them away, but they don't know what to do with them.
I
But
know.
you know, they could bring these things and have them displayed at this event. Pictures, scrapbooks, trophies, whatever.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
And that is. I have it down. I agree. And that's something that's really fun, just as a little tangent here. All of these discussions that we've had, this is our third one, have really led to some incredibly interesting discussions and to ideas for future programs and for potentially future publications or papers. And that's one reason I'm really glad that we have done these, because it really does get the juices flowing for us to think of these really fun ideas and really get community input. So thank you for that.
I know, like Joe's Kaplan AZA group from, you know, all those years ago, they still meet at what, once
a year.
at least once a year.
Oh,
And they bring
that's
people
so sweet.
from all over.
Yeah.
And people come
Is
from-
that the Christmas Day Classic?
No,
No,
that's
that's-
another.
That's
It's a
younger than
different thing. They're younger than me. They were younger by a few years than me.
yeah, that's Mark Shore's group.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know what chapter they were mostly in, but he did tell me this year that mostly their kids are playing the football now.
Oh,
I've heard that too. That's funny.
I think they're a little more worried about getting hurt. So.
That's
That's
funny.
the thing where people, you know, are still feel close to those people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Certainly a common ground.
Right.
It's nice to see those friendships last, those connections last so many decades. That doesn't always happen. Feel free to describe a favorite memory from your time participating with BBYO.
Yeah, tell about the one in Port Gibson.
Yeah.
It's topical now.
I have a very topical thing that I've told my children and grandchildren about. I'll let you. In the late 50s, I went to a District 7 convention in Port Gibson, Mississippi.
Woo.
Yeah, and you can look it up on the map. I don't remember anyway. Of course, everything in Dallas was segregated then, but we went on a bus to Port Gibson, Mississippi. The convention was at like if I remember, like a boys' boarding school or something that was there.
Uh-huh.
We drove, the bus stopped in the town of Port Gibson. And so we, were there on the bus, got off, got a Coke or whatever. And in Port Gibson, the sidewalks were made of wood. And that wasn't the thing. The thing was that the black people in Port Gibson, they didn't walk on the sidewalk. They walked on the street.
Right.
They didn't walk on the sidewalk. And when they went up the street, when men would walk the street, at that time they all wore hats. If they saw a white person walking up the sidewalk, they would tip their hats to them, no matter how many walked by. And I guess that was the moment that I became woke and realized that Mississippi is a place that's different from other places. And sure enough, in history, it turned out to be exactly what it was there.
Right.
I've told my grandchildren all of his story, and of course, they can't imagine such a thing.
No, that's visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So That,
You know, I remember that as a child in Tennessee, that they didn't walk in the street, but if you, because we walked around downtown a lot, and if a black person was walking on the sidewalk and a white person was walking by, they stepped off the curb into the street
Yeah.
yeah.
until that person passed.
Wow.
And yeah, it's definitely a feeling. You know, people think that you got used to it because that's how it always was, but I think that that's not really true. I think those of us, I think we all tried to see the humanity in everybody.
I know that. I mean, Joe talks about that all the time. I said, you know, he was shocked that here he was just a kid, and this guy was, you know, tipping his hat to him.
Well,
Right.
I had a very strange experience. I was about 12. My mother took us to Kansas City, where she was from, and she said, I have a very good friend who has a daughter your age, and y'all are going to go to lunch and a movie downtown when we get to Kansas City. Okay, fine. So we go to this person's house, and we walk to the bus stop just on the corner, and the bus comes, and I'd never been out of Dallas, really. And so she starts walking to the back of the bus. I was freaked out, and I said, you can't do this. And she just looked at me, and I said, we can't do this. It's illegal. And she just had no idea what I was talking about, because in Dallas, white sat in the front of the bus and black sat in the back, but they had a little thing that turned by the window. So like in the morning when the help came in, they had more seats for blacks, and in the evening they reversed it, whatever.
White and color.
And that was my limited life experience. And I thought the police were going to come after me. And I tried to explain to her, and she had no clue what I was talking about, you know, that we weren't allowed to sit in the back. It wasn't that I was prejudiced. I was afraid we were going to be in trouble. And anyway, that was my first knowledge that the whole world wasn't like Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Those realizations are always fun, no matter where you're from or where you are. The second you realize that it's just a little bit different. Awesome. So where do you see BBYO in Dallas headed in the future?
I hope it stays on. I don't know. I mean, I have to say, we're not really into that scene, because our grandchildren are not into that. The ones that are still here. But I hope it stays. I mean, my kids loved it.
I know at one point they had a junior group, sort of, where the kids could get in like a year early in some fashion.
Yeah, Team Connection.
What was that?
Team Connection is
So
what it's called.
they don't do that anymore?
I don't think so. I mean, I haven't seen anything about it in quite a while.
Yeah, it's just that now schools have so many activities, you know, that take their time than when we were growing up, and even kids somewhat. You know, be good to sort of get them before they get too maybe involved, give them a taste of it. Anyway.
I know I read.
Yeah, that's why that program was developed, because kids have so many more choices than we did, certainly than I did.
Right. Yeah, I know our granddaughter was the first one of her chapter who was head of that for the younger kids, and she was real excited about it. And I think they got in some kids that before they got so involved in other things, but then after I don't know whatever happened to all of that.
Yeah, that's one of those things with BBYO that kind of comes and goes, as far as I can tell. And of course, once they separated from B'nai B'rith, and they were really the last to go. ADL went first, and Hillel went next, and then BBYO really held out as long as
Nabrith women, the Nabrith women also, well, that was more recently even, I guess.
Well, that was, you know what, it wasn't so recent. It was
Well,
like 25 years ago already.
yeah, right. But way after these others, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because ADL, when I came to work for BBYO, ADL was already gone. And so once I separated from B'nai B'rith and brought in all new people, you know, even just looking at what international convention is, it's changed so drastically. To begin with, it's not held at camp anymore. So there's kind of no home base for it, although it seems to be here like every other year. And they have thousands of kids as opposed to hundreds. And they have, you know, the most remarkable speakers and group leaders and people like that about what's going on in the world. So I think as long as they continue to make it relevant, I think it'll go on. You know, I always think that somebody's fear is that, you know, one day the numbers are going to be so low, it's just going to dry up. And but I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's always going to be a place for a non-denominational Jewish youth group. Because even now, what Joe said earlier, it's still the neutral ground where kids meet. You know, you don't find Temple kids joining USY. You don't find conservative kids joining Temple Youth.
Right.
But they all found a way to be engaged in BBYO. And I think that's still true. Private school, public school, sports-minded, never want to play sports, whatever it might be. So I think that, but you know, I think the future is still very bright for them.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wonderful. That was the last of my questions. Is there anything that anyone would like to add that we didn't already touch upon?
Jessica?
Yes.
Would you want that shirt? Because I'm not wearing it again.
Yes, we would like to add it to the collection.
Something like that? Could y'all use something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it would actually be a really nice addition. We have a few BBYO District 7 shirts, but definitely not that one, and I don't think one from your particular era.
Okay. Well,
And Marty Goldman gave us his District 7 yearbooks.
Oh, that was great.
Remember they used to
I
publish
have
those?
printed yearbooks.
Yep. We have some from them, and we have some from Sabra and Bernard Klein.
Mhm.
And let's
Right,
see,
because
Liz.
Bernie was district director.
Yeah, and then Liz, the intern I mentioned, she donated her Texoma region convention T-shirt from early mid-2000s, like 10 or 12 years ago. So we have a pretty good spectrum with the inclusion of yours, Joe.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would hope somebody has a yearbook from the 50s, because you know we had in smaller communities, we had mixed it was BBYO. They didn't have enough to have separate AZ and BBG. There was a chapter in San Angelo. There was Tyler was very active. And I don't recall, you know, probably there were some chapters down near Houston, possibly also like that, and maybe Baytown and Port Arthur. But they had, you know, mixed, the boys and girls mixed together because they didn't have enough to separate.
Right.
The chapters. And there's yearbooks with their pictures and their chapters, and I can't remember. I don't think I have one anywhere, but I would hope somebody would. But
I bet somebody does.
Mm-hmm.
I know. But 19
We'll have to put a call out.
We will. We will. I'm just
There's
did a
several
big
people from
inventory on
Tyler.
your books.
there's
Uh-huh.
several people from Tyler in our community, like the Schoenbrums.
Mm-hmm.
They
Right.
may have something like that.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know they were from Thailand.
Yeah,
They are, both of them.
yeah, Greta and,
Very neat.
and in 1972, 73, there was a reunion here. I remember.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? And it was at the hotel over on LBJ somewhere.
Yes, yes, I was there.
I think you were there. I know we were there. And I remember, people from Houston came in.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So, and I don't know what kind of books.
In Oklahoma, I think some of them came too,
So
from
too.
Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
How cool. One thing I'd like to show very quickly on the screen. So we mentioned AOTA for AZA alumni. Me and Corinthia have been processing Ginger's collection, working pretty hard on that. And we came across an AOTA directory from 1953
Oh,
in her collection. Yeah. And there's definitely some B'nai B'rith women stuff, and not part of Ginger's collection, but I did come across an old AZA BBG directory that said B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, like the BBYO in the middle of it at a diagonal. I'll have to come across that again. I think that could be a good from the archive
Absolutely.
show. Yeah.
Cool.
That's great.
Well, very fun. Thank you all for joining us and
Thank you.
sharing
you
some info
And
on.
now I can't hear you.
This is what was wonderful.
Oh no.
Enjoyed it.
Great. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that they have been enjoyable, and it definitely gives us an idea going forward.
Right.
To continue doing these or continue building upon them for future programs.
Okay.
All righty.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.